What's up, everybody? What's going on? It's Rastafunk. This is Rastafunk's Internalize. We're here every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday till 8 o'clock. We start at 8 o'clock and we go until, hey, we finish talking and finish the conversation. So, yeah, we're going to let a couple people trickle on in and, let it go a little bit before we get started. I hope everybody's doing well. I'm definitely doing well, productive. Did some things today that needed to get done. Checked on a couple of people, ACs. Checked on my son. He was building a bed and putting up a closet that he knocked down. Just showing him how to do some things he needs to be able to do on his own without any assistance. And just living life. It's a beautiful thing, beautiful day. I really appreciate everybody who's checking us out and continues to check us out. We have the Cash App going, so $ the original Rastafunk. If you're enjoying what's going on and getting a little something from it, reciprocate. We appreciate it. Run them Cash Apps. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let me see. Trying to make sure that we logged in everywhere that we need to be logged in so that we can make this thing happen for the people the way it's supposed to happen. Yeah. Boom. Boom. Yeah. So, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're doing it. We're doing it. Yeah. It's been a pretty productive week, pretty productive day. Last night, we had a productive conversation. Is real or is fake? Pretty much just, determining whether or not the way we see things is relevant. Because when it's all said and done, Israel is real and Israel is not going anywhere. And there are lessons to take from that. One of the things that I left everyone with and to internalize is when it all started in the early 1900s, when they were really talking about Zionism with, and as well as when I'm saying that, I'm talking about other, it was on the radar of other countries like England, which was in control of the region at the time. At that point, the Jewish people, which is the European Ashkenazi Jew, were not seen as people that any country wanted. And by the mid 19th century or 20th century, because that's last century, um, the Jewish people had pretty much taken over Israel and was in control of that. And they've gotten to the point now in 2024 where they can do literal genocide that's being streamed every day, and the world isn't stopping them. What what do you have to do as a people to gain that respect? What do you have to do as a people to gain that respect? That's real key. That's real important. And trying to understand how they became the the people that nobody wanted to the people that nobody will mess with. Yeah. So that's kind of what the synopsis of last night. I left you with, how did they become the people that nobody wanted anywhere to the people that nobody will fuck with. Really, you know, they do whatever they want, and no one's calling them on it. We're seeing children dying every day, and no one's calling them on it. So, that's a little traumatic on one hand, but then on another hand, if you can get outside of your emotions and your feelings, you're able to see a bigger picture. And especially as a Pan African, you should be able to look at certain things in the world and take from it what you can use. Now, there's certain battles there that the world need to be fighting. There's certain immoralities that the world need to be fighting, but they're not going to fight it until we get ourselves together as Africans. they're not going to fight it until Africa as a whole is fighting it and representing um, what um, what the world should be. We are that example. We've always been that example. We've always set the bar um, from day one. And very interestingly, you can look at Wakanda in that fictional sense. They had something that the world could not stop. And because they wanted to develop it, they made it so that they hid from the world until they got to a point where they couldn't be stopped. And this is all fictional, but at the same time, you can learn from um, the example, because that's what we're talking about, examples. Israel is an example of a people that nobody wanted to becoming a people that nobody will mess with. And Wakanda was kind of like became a people that nobody will mess with. Not so much that they started out in a certain way. They started out with nobody knowing that they even existed. But that was the whole point in gaining the power that they wanted to gain, was to be able to do it without the resistance of imperial powers, colonial powers, interfering with their growth. And that is uh, the hurdle that Pan Africans around the world, and especially in Africa, we must keep running and make it over that hurdle of progression without interference from the colonial powers. That's our objective. That's what we must do as adults. That's what we must be teaching our children to do, and that comes through innovation, technology. You know, Israel can't defend itself unless they have the best weapons available. And at this point, Israel is training American police and American organizations on how to, defend themselves and how to suppress people as far as the population. So, with that said, that was last night. Israel is fake, and Israel is real. It's not fake at all. It's some real things going on and some real examples to be used for us to better ourselves. Obviously, we don't want to follow the bad examples. So, we'll just leave it there. Tonight, we are talking about to spank or not to spank. That is the question. And why are we talking about to spank or not to spank? How does that correlate with the Pan-Africanist view? How does that correlate with the Black American that we have here in this country, in America? How does that correlate with the moving forward, to spank or not to spank? For me, I'll tell you a little story about how I was raised. I was raised where when kids would talk about getting spanked, and first of all, we never used that term. That was a term that was reserved for white people. I can honestly say I don't think I've ever heard Black people use that term at all. So unless we're referring to white people. But it pretty much means the same thing. Spanking, whooping, beating. And in the Black community, I'm gonna stump a mud hole in your ass if you do that shit again. Might be told to you as a child. When I grew up, the actual hitting as a quote unquote form of discipline for a child is not unheard of. However, the beating and whooping and getting extension cords and stuff like that, and leaving whelps on children, that is in our community in particular, the African American, the African community here in the diaspora, that comes from slavery. It's a direct result from slavery, where you punish a slave not so much for what they did, but so much you punish them so that everyone knows not to do that. The other slaves know not to do it. You punish them in front of the other slaves, and you punish them um, um, almost to the point of death. And that's purposely to let the other slaves know, don't do that. Don't do that, because you're going to get this too, you know. In certain areas, they actually, part of what they did, the slaves, was cut hands off and feet off and that type of deal. They cut limbs, you know. Sometimes they cut genitals. Sometimes they would rape your daughter or wife in front of you. Sometimes they would rape men. But all of this was done in front of other slaves to show them not to do whatever the rule that was broken. Don't break the rules, period. You know. So the way it's traditionally thought of in our community comes from slavery. And so I was raised that way. You know, I was raised where when other kids would say, yeah, I was running when my mom was beating me and one dad was beating me, that was unheard of for me. I was raised to sit there and take it till it was over with, you know, like literally, literally, literally. And not to embarrass my mother, but the last whooping I got, because of how I would get beat and so forth and so on, it was pretty bad, as far as her technique of what she did. However, the last whooping I got, I may have been in about sixth or seventh grade. Maybe no, I'm sorry, it may have been about fourth grade, fourth or fifth grade. And in the middle of hitting me, she stopped and started crying, and she revealed at that point that she always said if she had kids, she would never um, beat them or treat them the way she was treated. Now, my mother was raised by her older sister and her great grandmother, and her parents died when she was 12. So, my great grandmother, she was a strict disciplinarian and very religious. So, you did anything against church rules or her rules, you got it. And she was a stenching cord person. So she got a cord from something and she would whoop you and you had whelps. And, you know, so that's how my mom, you know, was raised, you know, when she was dealing with her grandmother until she felt old enough to leave and not deal with it. And I'm not sure if her sister actually disciplined them in that way. But, you know, that's how she was raised. And so, you know, before she knew it, it carried over to me. But I will always respect that she stopped. She saw what she was doing, and she stopped, and she never hit me again. Now I will say that I did. What did I do? I think I stayed out too late. Like I used to have to be in before the street lights came on, type of deal, and I stayed out pretty late. And they went looking for me, and you know, and I think I made it home before they found me. And anyway, I can remember her saying, "Beat him, Leonard. Beat him, Leonard." You know, so you know, well, while she didn't administer corporal punishment, my father did a couple of times, and my father wasn't that type of person. My father was the type of person, he might hit you a couple of times, and that was enough. That was indeed enough, you know. And I can honestly say I got hit by him twice. It was never with a belt; it was actually with his hand, and I'm really glad it was with nothing else, because he didn't play. You know, when it got that far. However, he was not the type to want to hit you at all. He was the type to talk to, explain to you. Hitting was a last resort, and you had to do something very disrespectful. And pretty much, the first one was my mom beat him, Leonard beat him, you know, and he felt like, you know, he just needed to do something, you know, to you know, to keep peace in the house. But the second time I had did something really bad, you know. So I mean literally, I had little girls' dads want to kill me. I was just a little mannish little boy, and so um, you know, that second one I deserved, you know, I deserved to be punished. Now, with that said, I've never hit my kids. I don't hit my kids. I don't believe in hitting kids. I believe that's violence. And this is why. This is why. And you can look throughout society and you're going to see this, especially with children who were disciplined in that way. You have what getting a whooping taught me. I was an intelligent child. So it taught me to lie quick and get away with. Wasn't me. Oh no, that was this and that. I can remember my mom used to have parties and she would stock the refrigerator with alcohol for the people coming to the party. And when she would have the parties, she'd have so much beer that I could steal some of the beer and go drink it with my friends. So this particular party night, I took some beers, put them in a bag, and put them by the trash can outside. My dad, for whatever reason, decided to empty the trash. Now, as a young man, that was my chore. My dad never emptied the trash because he never had to. I did it. And I'm not even sure if the trash needed to be emptied at that point in time because I would have emptied it, because I had planned on going out and hanging out with my friends with the beers. Anyway, my dad went empty the trash and he saw the bag of beers. And so he brought them back inside and asked me about them. And just as quickly as he asked me about them, I told him, well, I put them by the trash to throw away. Because when I took the trash out, because I didn't want my mom drinking all that alcohol. I felt like if I took some away, it'd be less they drunk. And so he looked at me and he said, I didn't drink until I was 19. And I don't expect you to be drinking. And so, that moment passed. The next party, I took some beer, And so my point was, whatever it took not to be disciplined, because I was raised with the worst discipline possible. So I ain't want that. And so for me, it was, I'm going to get away with it. If I'm going to do something, I'm not going to get caught. Now, the opposite of that is what you're raising if you beat, because there's no in between. You're either raising, I'm not going to get caught lying, I'm going to get away with type deal, or you're raising a very scary, snitchy type kid who going to tell on everybody, who going to, just be the most timid, scary little kid ever, because they don't want to get beat. They done seen everybody get beat. They done got beat. So they do whatever they have to do not to get beat. And they're scared to lie. They're scared to lie because they might get caught and get beat. So they tell the truth. He did it. Wasn't me. They did it, and telling the truth is admirable. Telling the truth is admirable. Snitching, however, is not always admirable. I'm not going to say that that telling the truth about people who do bad things is always bad. However, I think when I say snitching is not an admirable trait, I believe you can read between the lines and understand where I'm coming from. And so when you hit a child, you're going to raise when that's how the discipline goes. Pretty much you're raising one or two children, no in between. No child is that admits to things and takes it and then does it again. Maybe 1 out of 17 million children are like that. But for the most part, they're going to do what they need to do to escape punishment. Period. And so with that said, to spank or not to spank, that's what we're discussing. We're discussing where has it, we want to, by the end of the night, we'll, go over, has it gotten us anywhere as a people? And we'll also talk about some other techniques of child rearing. It's a couple of videos I'm going to show that will speak on these issues. There are people that I don't necessarily follow, but one guy in particular, his name's Jordan B. Peterson. He seems to be some sort of expert on the rearing of children. And I watched a few videos. The video I'm gonna show tonight I actually didn't watch, but I like the title and I like some of his information. You know, he doesn't seem to necessarily have an agenda per se. The second video is about raising boys. And this guy, I probably would never follow him. But this particular video, and he has some other videos that may have some good information, you know. But this particular video has some good information on raising boys. And raising boys in particular, as a man and as a father of a boy, is important to me. I do have a daughter, and raising daughters is just as important to me. However, I won't say that I'm an expert as a father raising a daughter, but just there's certain things that in being a woman and a wife, they get from their mother. They're not going to get that from me. So I won't focus on that tonight. I will say that there are people out there who speak on these things. They have videos for single mothers. And both of these guys, I believe, have videos for single mothers, or single parenting, or a child who's growing up without a father, that type of deal. So you can find information, even if you don't like these guys, you can find information from people that is relevant. You know, one thing about how Africans do things, you won't find as many videos on how an African does things as much as you will just in generally how people do things. And so, you know, I use this information in the ways that I can use it. You know, I don't follow, like I said, I don't follow these people. They're not the experts. Neither one of these are the experts in my opinion, but they have videos that have some good information. And I think that it's important to absorb good information when you're trying to raise your children, besides just what we know. You know, sometimes you may run into problems with unruly kids. You know, sometimes you may run into problems with boys who don't want to grow to be a man. They want to be big old boys, and you're like, hey, you gotta do something different, bro. You know, so it's different reasons for why you may want to go search out more information, but just know that you don't necessarily ever have to do it alone. There's information out there to help you. And when you're raising children, the best solution I can give anyone is to create a community. You may not know a lot of people, but you know, through school organizations, through extracurricular activities, you create communities. You are able to bond with other mothers, and fathers can bond with other fathers, and bond with other parents. You know, so one of the major things I can say is, you know, raise your kids around, create a community. You know, a friend of mine mentioned, and it's funny because I still laugh at this, but he mentioned in one of his videos about an incident where his son and a friend, well, he was with his son and two other little boys. One of the little boys happened to not really be around men. He was around his mother all the time. And so when the kids were playing, they were running. One of the boys stopped and said, hey, you run gay. And, you know, it's a little funny, little kid saying that. However, by the end of that interaction, the little boy who was running funny to the other kids started running a little bit more like you're supposed to run, because he learned that that's not how you run. That's not as effective as doing it the other way. You know, so being around a community can really help, especially when there may not be a man around all the time when you're raising a boy, or vice versa. If you got a little girl, may not be a woman in her life all the time. So getting her around other little girls and other women is going to help develop her and develop her womanhood in the ways that she needs, because we can't give her all that information. We just can't, because we purposely don't necessarily think like women, and we purposely don't necessarily act like women. You know, so when it's all said and done, a community is what I would recommend for anyone when you're having children. Build community, whatever, however you can find it, build community. You know, I don't go to church, but if that's your thing, that's a community, you know, where you have readily available men, you know, who can help counsel sometimes, and help give input if you have you need to talk to a man, or you need a man to talk to your child, you know. So with that said, I'm gonna start with the first video, and then we'll talk about some things. This video is from Jordan B. Peterson, and it's how to handle a rebellious child. Yeah. Share the screen. Got it. Boom. Let me get it right for everybody. Boom. That's how I want it to be. All right. So let us play.
One thing I remember with my son, who is he's quite disagreeable by temperament, which is actually a good thing as far as I'm concerned, although it brings its own challenges. And so with my daughter, when she was misbehaving, she was pretty agreeable. And, you know, if she was misbehaving, I could basically just look at her and then she'd quit, you know. But my son, it was like, that was just nothing. You're looking at me, it's like, no, that's just not going to go anywhere, man. And so then I'd like tell him to stop, and that really wasn't having much of an effect either. He just sort of maybe laugh or run away or whatever. I mean, he was a tough little rat. And, you know, what I would do with him is he would be doing something and I'd interfere, and he'd get upset and, you know, angry. And so then I'd get him to sit on the steps, and I told him, and this is when he was about 2, I said, look, you're going to sit on the steps. That's timeout. You're going to sit on the steps until you've got control of yourself and you can come back and play the family game again. I basically said,
excuse me,
be a civilized human being, and then you're welcome again. And so he'd sit on the steps. It was so interesting to watch because he was just enraged. He'd sit there. Like, have you ever seen a 2-year-old have a temper tantrum? It's really quite the bloody phenomena. If you ever saw an adult do that, you'd call 911 right away. It's like, oh my God. And I've seen adults do that, you know, because people say with borderline personality disorder will have temper tantrums. And it's like, man, you want to be about 30 feet away from that person. That's for sure. It's really, but in kids, it's like, well, first of all, they're only this long. So how much trouble can they really cause? But it's like, you know, they're just completely gone. They're like on the floor, their face is red. They're just furious, like way more furious than you ever get if you're even vaguely socialized. They're just outraged, and they're kicking and hitting the ground, and like it's like a little epileptic fit of anger, you know. They're completely controlled by their rage, and we took care of it.
Now, in our society, as far as children are concerned, especially with and I'm talking, when I say our society, I'm really talking about our community as far as Black people. We don't play that. That's one of the first things that'll get you a butt whooping, is to show out in public, you know. So, you know, as we're watching this, we want to, you know, not have any cultural bias and just kind of listen and get the positive information from it, as opposed to any of the difference in culture type deals. Because I'm telling you, that's not going to pass in our society, in our community. Like, he's talking too much about it. It wouldn't be that much talk. So we'll get back to the video.
One kid for a while he was actually a pushover, that kid. You could get him to behave by, you know, kind of shaking your finger at him, but his mother thought he was really tough because he had her figured out. And one of the things he would do is have a temper tantrum. And during the temper tantrum, he would hold his bloody breath until he turned blue. It's like, try that. Like, you know, that's your homework. Go home and have a temper tantrum. And while you're doing it, hold your breath until you actually turn blue. It's like, you won't be able to do it. You don't have the willpower of a 2-year-old. That's for sure. That little varmint, man, he'd just have a fit. Then he'd hold his breath and then he'd turn blue. It was like, wow, that's amazing. And we would just like let him do it. And, you know, he'd turn blue and everybody would be gone and he'd come out of it, you know, and it didn't work. So he just quit doing it. I think he did it like twice and he figured out, oh, well, that's a lot of work for very little outcome. And, you know, it's not like 2-year-olds are stupid. They're not stupid. They're probably smarter than you, but they're not civilized by any stretch of the imagination. And so anyways, back to my son, I'd put him on the steps and he'd be like, just like enraged and trying to get himself together, you know, and I'd wait a few, I got a strict rule, which was as soon as you're done, you're welcome again. So it's completely under your control. You get yourself calmed down, you come and talk to me again. If you're calm enough so I like you, then you're welcome back in the family. No grudge, nothing. And so it's harder than you think. Like, people think they like their kids. It's like, don't be thinking that. They're hard to like. They're little monsters and they're very, very pushy and provocative. And so lots of parents do not like their children and they do terrible things to them their whole life. So it's no joke. And it's very common. And, you know, that was Freud's observation, fundamental observation, that a lot of psychopathology is rooted in the family. And you can be sure of that. You know, and when you hear about some mother.
Now, he used the term that a lot of times I think we're afraid to deal with. And that's liking your children. When they start acting in a certain way, you know, if they're acting in a certain way that you don't agree with, then that's pretty much you as a parent raising a child that you don't like. And first of all, why are you doing that? Why are you raising a child? You know, so his approach, you know, is an approach where if the child's giving him behavior he doesn't like, he will separate the child from what he's saying. Let the child go on his own, do what you're gonna do, and you can come back with the group when you're gonna be cooperative. And you know, we can talk about it before you join the group. You know, that's kind of what he's saying. But more so than anything, you have to be in charge of building the child that you are going to like. And that starts with you being the example, because they're looking at you. And whatever you're doing, a lot of times that has something to do with the bad things they're doing. You know, so just take note that as a parent, it's really incumbent upon you to be the best person you can be, because your child's watching you. You know, now, and that's how you build a child that you like. And, you know, every now and then the children will do things that you don't like. They'll push boundaries. And, you know, you find ways that works for your family and for your child that shows them that that's not going to be tolerated. That's the bottom line. When they're doing things that you don't like, immediately they have to know it's not going to be tolerated, so that they won't continue to do that. So they'll be a child that you like. But I have a friend. He's a very good friend, and he didn't talk to his daughter for some years. Once she became a certain age, she rebelled against him when he was talking to her, and so he just like, all right, you got it, you good, you got it, and that mostly had to do with he didn't feel like he had the control, or he didn't have input on her being raised in to be the person that he would like. So he kind of threw it away. However, you can't do that. You know, now if you're dealing with a well-matured adult and y'all don't agree, that's a different thing. But when you're dealing with teenagers and young adults, they're new to life. They're new to a lot of the world. And so as a parent, you really have to stay with them. You really have to stay with them. And you know, and like I say, even then, if they're having behavior that you don't want to tolerate, you don't have to tolerate it, you know, and y'all can be cool when things come back around. Y'all can be cool as adults, but to throw the relationship away is not what you do as a parent. That's the worst example you could ever do, you know. And me and my friend talked about it, and he's regained a relationship with his daughter, which is beautiful and awesome. But at the same time, that's not what you do. You create a child that you like, and if they're doing things that you don't like, you show them that you're not going to tolerate it. And you know, and that's throughout their life, period. You know, so we'll keep it moving. But I just wanted to highlight whether you like a child or, you know, that's we don't hone in on that enough. Build the child that you want to like. For real. All right, get back to the video.
Mother who's done something terrible to her child, which happens reasonably frequently, you know perfectly well that she has a very terrible capacity to discipline. The child's just provoked her and provoked her and provoked her and provoked her and provoked her. And it just happens to be a day where her new boyfriend left and she's quite hungover and she got fired. And it's like, that's the wrong day to provoke her. And then she does something that is not good. And you read about it and you think, well, how could that happen? How could anyone do that? Well, that's how they do it. And so, and kids are very, very provocative, just like little chimps. Chimps will, the adolescents will like throw little pebbles and sticks at the sleeping larger males and bug them. And that teasing, which it is, that teasing turns into full-fledged dominance challenge behavior once the adolescent males get big enough to do it. And so when you're being provoked by a child, which they provoke you all the time, they're trying to figure out, well, just where are you exactly? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? You know, and how else are they going to figure it out? Anyways, he'd sit on the steps and he's just enraged and trying to control himself. And I'd watch that. And then, you know, I'd come back after about 2 minutes or whatever, and he'd still be, I'd say, well, you know, have you got yourself under control? Are you ready to get off the steps? He'd go, no, not yet. And then, you know, he'd get himself under control, and then he'd come back and, you know, he'd be contrite. And then I would like him right away, you know. You got to watch that, you know, because you don't like being dominated by a 2-year-old. No one does. And so if the child hasn't mastered himself and started to act in accordance with the prevailing social norms, you won't like them. Well, you think, oh yeah, I will, because, you know, I'm a good person. It's like, no, you won't. And no, you're not a good person. So don't be thinking about that at all. It's just not true. So when he was contrite, then he'd come and then, you know, we just go on like nothing had happened. Because that's what you want to do, right? As soon as you get compliance, especially if the compliance is in the best interest of the child, you want to reward it instantly, right? That's the right thing to do. Because so then, and you could just see him gaining control over himself. And so really what was happening is in his mind, in his brain, we'll say there was a war between the psyche, the ego that was starting to become integrated, you know, and starting to become a continuous person, an identity. And it's fragile in 2-year-olds, and it can be disrupted all the time, and it is. That's why they're so hyper emotional. It's fragile, that little ego, and it doesn't have a lot of power. And so what you want to do is reward it when it wins. You know, it's when he gets control over the underlying motivations, you want to say, hey, good work, man, good work, kid. You did it, you know, you got yourself under control, way to be. And the kid's really happy about that because it's actually not that much fun to have a temper tantrum. It's exhausting, you know, it takes you over. Question?
Yeah. Can you give an example of what you would reward him with?
Oh, just a pat on the head, or, you know, that's good, or kind word, you know, or whatever. No. Or, yeah.
Okay, so what I want to do is just unpack it just a little bit. Because in our Black community, I tell people all the time, because I said so, that particular saying, because I said so, has us really messed up when it comes to how you actually gain respect and how you actually get what you're trying to get without the real pushback. And basically what he's doing is he's explaining. He's not saying because I said you don't have this tantrum because I said you don't have this tantrum. He's allowing him to go through it. And when it's over with, he's saying, I'm glad you overcame yourself. He's explaining to the child what just happened in a way that pushes the child towards the person he likes. No, he don't want to see no tantrums. No, he doesn't feel like it was quote unquote necessary to overcome yourself at that moment because you shouldn't have never been having a tantrum for whatever was going on. However, in teaching the child not to do it again, telling them you don't do that doesn't work. But explaining to them why you need certain things. You're not cleaning up the house and doing chores because I said so. You're cleaning up the house and doing chores because cleanliness is godliness. And as you get older, it teaches you responsibility for yourself. So when you have your own space, you're going to take care of it. That's what that's all about. Teaching you how to take care of your own. Teaching you how to create a space where you can think. And it's not all jumbled up. Creating a person, you also and you're creating a person you like. When you go to their house, they clean house, you know. So when it's all said and done, because I said so, it's some bullshit. It's not, you know, it's not how it works. It works when you're able to explain to your child. Now, that doesn't mean that you're always having a conversation with your child about everything. You know, it's many times I tell my kids, it's not a conversation. That's what you're going to do. I tell them why, but it's not a conversation. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, everything doesn't have to be a conversation, but at the same time, explaining is important. Because I said so is not. No. If you explain, then they learn to follow you because you're telling them they'll be able to see things clearly that that's the right way to go. And if you're, you know, taking care of business, then they want to be just like you. So, you know, I just wanted to unpack that particular part, that what he's doing actually is explaining to his child. Yeah, you may not get to that point. If your child's having a tantrum, you know, you may want to pick them up. You may, you know, it's a lot of things, and we'll talk about that as we go further. I have some little insights on that, but we'll finish this video. But I just wanted to unpack that one little part about explaining to your child and talking to your child so that they can understand and see what's the best behavior.
Yeah, notice it, pay attention. That's it, pay attention. And it's a great thing to know with people, like in your relationships. Here's the key to a good relationship. It's not the only one, but watch your person carefully. And whenever they do something that you would like them to do more of, tell them that was really good and mean it. And it's not manipulative, because if it's manipulative, it won't work. It's like you have to say, wow, I'm so glad you did that. And you have to be precise. Here's what you just did that I thought was great. And oh boy, that's so nice that you noticed. I can't believe that you noticed. It's like, you know, you do that 20 times and the person will be like the rat that's just pushing the lever for cocaine, you know. So, but no, I'm serious. It's Skinner established this. B.F. Skinner noticed this a long time ago. Reward is intensely useful in terms of modifying behavior. But the problem is that it's really hard to notice when things are going right? Because you're kind of primed to notice when things are going wrong. And so you use threat and punishment more often as agents of shaping the people that you're around. Because, you know, when everything's going right, it's like, what are you going to say? Everything's going right.
That's a good point. You know, when things are going bad, that's a very good point. Matter of fact, that I'm glad I watched it to this point, because that is a great point. When things are going right, it's hard to notice. When you're a child, you know, to understand that it's right. You know, things are just moving along. You know, and it may feel right, but you don't know. You know, but you definitely know when you do something wrong. You know, in this society and in our community, You do something wrong, people jump on you real quick, you know. So I also agree with the rewarding, you know. I understand what he's saying. Rewarding is not so much like giving your dog a treat. It's not that. It's simply identifying that's how you do it. My son just put up a bed. I left my drill. I said he was like, gotta put this bed up. So I told him, let me see the instructions. The instruction says you need a drill and a couple of bits and this and that. So say, come on out to the truck. Gave him the stuff. Say, send me a picture when it's done. He sent me the picture. I texted him back. Great job, son. Great job. Had a closet that he knocked down. I had to talk to him about putting that back up, you know. But in that talk, it was a two-way talk. Why you don't do what you do that made the closet door fall. Secondly, you could have been put it back up. It wasn't that difficult. It's two doors. Look at the other door. What is this door missing? Within 1 minute, I found the piece because I looked at that. Well, I already knew about how it worked. But the point I'm making is, had he taken the time, it would have already been put up. You know, but once he did put it up, hey, good job, son. You know, that's what you're supposed to do. So I believe in exactly what he's saying. And identifying when things are going right. You want to identify that with your child. Because then they know. They don't just feel it. They don't just see that they're not getting yelled at. They know that this is how you do it. And that's part of explaining. That's part of getting out of because I said so. You know, you have to teach these things. And it's a continuous thing, you know. It's not an overnight thing. Parenting is not an easy job. It's something that you have to stay active in, you know. It's very much like driving. You know, I tell people all the time, driving is an active activity. If you get in the lane and you think you're just good in that lane, you're a terrible driver. You should always be aware of what's around you, and you should always move with what's going on. Sometimes someone's pulling up on you. Get out their way. Get back over there. You know, you don't have to teach someone a lesson on the road, that type of deal. Ain't my fault you late. They may have an emergency. They may not have. Somebody may be dying or something. You don't know what's going on behind you. You know, so it's an active activity. You shouldn't be comfortable listening to your music, and no one should be disturbing you because you're doing that while you're driving. That's silly. So let's finish.
It turns to zero. You just assume it, and that's not good. That's not good. You want to pay attention, and if your person, your children, your wife, your whoever, your mother, your sister, if you want to rectify your relationships with them, and I'm not saying to do this in a manipulative way, it won't work. But if they do something that's promoting harmony and peace and goodwill, it's like, attend to it, tell them that you noticed. It's like, it's so useful. And you have to get rid of your grudges and your resentment to do that, right? Because you're kind of mad at your sister, and then you notice she does something good. You think, there's no goddamn way I'm going to reward her for that. So you ignore her when she does something good. It's like, that's brilliant, that is. Because then you've just punished her for doing what you want. And people do that with their kids all the time, you know, because they let the kids dominate them. Then they get resentful. Then the kid will run up to them, show them something that's kind of spectacular, and they're not happy. They're like, oh yeah, that's, you know, I'm working. You know, little kid all sad about that, and he's just learned something. So, and it's not perhaps what you want him to learn. And so you have to keep your relationship with your children pristine. And that means that you can't hold a grudge or resent them. And that means that you have to help them learn how to behave so that you like them. And that way, if you like them and you're kind of sensible, and maybe your partner also likes them, so you know you got a consensus going there, there's a reasonable possibility that other people will actually like them too, including other children, and then the world will open up to them.
All right, that was it. So that was Jordan B. Peterson. He has a lot of helpful videos. That one, to be honest, had I watched it before I actually played it tonight, it wasn't as good as some of his other videos that I watched prior. but it was relevant and helpful, and it did cover what I wanted to cover, which is um, difficult times with kids, because that's what we all have at certain times. When we're raising kids, it's some pushback, you know. Um, my daughter, in particular, is extremely intelligent, extremely smart, and she does well in school. And I love my daughter. However, there are certain things that um, I have to find balance in. And so for me, how I find balance is in things that they want to try. Um, is I ask them to explain it. And if they can explain it in a way that, not so much that I always respect it, but if they can explain it in a way that I know that they understand what it is they're trying to do, then at that point, I have to be behind them to a certain extent until it either doesn't work or, I have to let them try. One thing I know that children are not us, and they will want to try things that we don't think is going to work, but they're not us. And that's how innovation happens, by someone trying something that you may not think will work, but they can see it, and they can see the end result, and they can see exactly how it's done. So my daughter challenges me in that way all the time. However, if she can explain what she's trying to do, then I'm behind her. One simple thing was she wanted to get extra piercings, and so my challenge to her was to explain um, why people get piercings and what exactly um, your purpose is in correlation to why people do it. So initially she came back with fashion and that type of deal, and I said, dig a little deeper, dig a little deeper. That's not it. That's not it at all. And so then she came back with how shaman and witch doctors of sorts, how they use different metals as antennas of sorts, and how they're using it to for lack of a better way of putting it, communicate with the spiritual world, and to commune and to connect. When you have um, certain crystals and rocks, and you're holding them, certain energies, are supposed to, be going through you from the earth, that type of deal. So, when I saw that she had researched enough and she could tell me exactly what she was trying to do with her extra piercings and that, so forth and so on, we were able to come to terms. And that's what I'm saying. I just I make them do the research on why it is they want to do certain things they want to do, and if they can come back with something that shows me that they understand what they're trying to do, then as a parent, a lot of times I'm going to be behind them, because that's my job, to support them in trying things that we don't think is going to work, but they think they see the, and sometimes they come back and say, Dad, you was right, that didn't work, that was stupid, but those are the lessons that you allow your children to learn. As we keep it moving, uh, we're socializing our children when you hit them to respond to state violence. So part of the state not changing and being better, and part of people not thinking of ways to make it better, comes from um, you disciplining your child by beating them or spanking them. And so what happens is your child sees people in society protest or rebel, and it could be a positive thing that they're talking is needs to change. But when they see them people get beat, they're like, not me. I know I'm follow the rules. Follow the rules. And so, you know, a lot of times you're socializing your child to respond to state violence in the way the state wants, you know. And let me put this out here as a sidebar. I'm not into protesting. I'm not into um, fighting the state in that way. I don't feel like that. I'll say this 1,000 times: power is not going to concede uh, their power. Not because you hold up a sign or because y'all out there walking or because y'all block a road. They're going to, what power is going to do is show you how powerful they are. And, you know, one thing we've learned throughout the story of mankind is is violence can show power, or violence can prove power. So you have to really be intelligent about what you're doing to create change. And I can tell you that protesting and wasting that time, you know, when power don't react to that. You know, if they do in any way, it's not as beneficial to you as you think. And if they do react in a certain way, I'm sure they're still holding their power and their position. So, you know, when it's all said and done, that's not necessarily the thing, you know, that you're not gonna make power give up power. Also, you can't. Also, we need to redefine discipline by understanding what discipline is. Discipline is about discipline is what you teach yourself. Now we use discipline as this adjective to like we're teaching children, but actually self-discipline is what you teach yourself. And if you have self-discipline, you can impart it and teach it to someone else. But if you don't, the first time you show that chink, all your lessons go out the door. Because to be a disciplined person, it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of sweets, it's a lot of things that you don't deal with, that, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it, will make life a little better or a little funner, you know, in a certain light. Not, you know, but especially with a child, you know. So when you're teaching that discipline, you have to be disciplined. I tell people that the monasteries where you see these monks, whether it be religious monks or whether it be spiritual monks or martial artist monks or whatever, the monastery is not in the city next to the club. The monastery is always away from the city, because to create that self-discipline, you need to be in a space where, well, many times it helps to be in a space where there's no distraction. In the city, and especially in the Western cities, it's nothing but distraction. It's nothing but distraction. You know, candy can be a distraction. Sugar can be a distraction. You know, so but we're mostly talking about just the media, women. If you're a man trying to be disciplined, men offering women things. If you're trying to be a woman and be disciplined, you know, it's so many distractions. There's another sidebar. There's this thing going on in hip hop right now, where some of the quote unquote top hip hop entertainers are they're doing what you call a diss track on each other. You know, they're one. Really, they're just grown men writing angry poems to each other. But when it's all said and done, a brother put it this way. He said there's a lot going on right now, and it's just all over the social media thing. And to me, it feels more like a distraction as opposed to just diss tracks. It's a distraction. So, you know, those distractions are able to infiltrate your focus and your path because you're not disciplined. But if you're disciplined, you're able to keep moving within your path while bullets are flying around you. And that's what being disciplined is. And you can't teach that by beating someone. You teach that by being that. That's how you teach that. You teach that by being that. And if you're that, the lessons that you're teaching make more sense to the person who you're trying to teach them to, even if it's a child, because they see you doing it. They see that success. You know, remember, we just mentioned that identifying when things are going good. They're able to identify that being disciplined is good, right? Because that's what you're teaching them, you know. So it's just important to understand that you can't beat discipline into nobody. You're not really disciplining nobody. But if you're a self-disciplined person, you will be able to teach discipline to the person, your child, to your child. So I'm going to move on to the second video. This is really short. It's about 5 minutes or so. It's not long at all. But it's basically going into raising a boy. And I think that this is real important because a lot of us don't understand why we're seeing the young men in our community not be men. Why a lot of our sisters are dealing with high experiences when they're dealing with men. And it's really because we're not raising sons to be men. That's why. Because we're not raising sons to be men. And if we're not doing that, that's where the issue comes in. So here we go. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the next video. Boom. And boom. Here we go.
Quickly, that his obligations to his son are actually very different. I was already a very, very proud girl dad when I found out I was having a son. And look, every man wants a son, and every man learns very quickly that his obligations to his son are actually very different than his obligation to his daughters. And you would think it would be easier. But the secret that I don't think anybody actually tells a father is that in many cases, it's actually much harder. Because with a son comes the inevitable knowledge that what you're doing is training your replacement. Now, sons tend to go through 3 stages when they're young. They're a cub, then they're a boy, and then they're a young man. And one of the first lessons your son will ever learn about what it is to be a man is his observation of how you treat his mother. When you properly love, honor, respect, protect, and provide for his mother, you are showing him what a father.
Boom. 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 Let's stop right there and unpack that for a second.
Father does. You are.
Let's stop right there and unpack that for a second. When you're dealing with, as a woman, a crop of men, when your main experience with men has been negative, it has everything to do with whether or not the father was taking care of the mother. Everything has everything to do with it. If that boy never seen no man take care of a woman, he don't know how to do it. My mother, in particular, she was a single mother. My father, now don't get me wrong, my father was always in my life. I knew my father from day one. My only judgment of my father was his other children didn't know him from day one. That was it. My father was, I love my father, I respected my father. Love my grandfather, knew his parents, So I had a good relationship with my father. I actually was able to be around men, but that was because of my mother. My father, they weren't married, and his parents, it was in a time where having children out of wedlock wasn't, was, they've all, people, hold on, I'm sorry about that. Give me 1 second. I got some noise in the background. Give me 1 second. We're gonna go back to the video, and I'll stop that noise in the background. I'm sorry.
Who are creating a standard that will inform his own expectations and a sense of responsibility, and they pick up on it very young. My little boy loves his mother. I mean, there was no question in it from a very early age that they had a special bond. And me having spent a good amount of time the first couple years of his life deployed to Iraq, among other places,
Okay, I apologize. I had some other things happening that weren't supposed to be happening. It just popped up. So with that said, I really respect my father. I knew my father, but part of that was because my mother made sure that I knew my father. My father's mother went, because he was athlete and in college, and having children young can change the trajectory of your life. My father's mother was like, my baby ain't had no kid, da 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 da, and my mama wasn't having it. This your grandson. And the irony of that is my grandmother is one of the most powerful influences in my life. She loved me to death after she got to know me. She initially just was trying to protect her son in the way people did in those days. However, my mama wasn't having it, so I knew my dad and my grandmother. But what was also key is my mother. She was a pretty young woman, and I'm sure she dated more than the 3 men that I saw. The only men I saw that she dated was my father and my stepfather and the guy that she was actually about to marry before my stepfather stepped in the picture. Those are only 3 men I ever known to be around my mother, and all those men took care of my mother and me when we were around. So that was what I saw. And that was on purpose. Any other men my mother had me around, my uncles or anyone, it was funny because when I was young, one of the first things I remember my mother telling me is, if they touch you, you let me know. And she was talking about anybody, but that's what I'm saying. My mother was very on point when she was trying to raise me in certain ways. Now, yeah, she was a victim of how you discipline children, and she learned from that. But at the same time, when it came to being around men, she only had me around men. Wasn't no sorry dudes around me at all. Matter of fact, she had me around men so much that my mother was a model. And one of her friends that she modeled with and that helped out was this cat named Ray. And when some years later, as I was an adult, I remember Ray being around. Ray was her good friend. He drove a little yellow bug. But everybody drove bugs in the 70s. But what was funny was I was around men so much that she mentioned he was gay as I was an adult. This is 20, 30 years later. And I was like, Ray was gay? She said, yeah, he drove a little yellow bug. And so it made sense as an adult. But my mom, it was 2 things about my mom. My mom kept me around men, and through her talk with her friends and stuff, she would identify men who were gay all the time, like he gay, and so Ray never came in that conversation, so I never thought of Ray as that way. I just never thought about it. A man was a man unless my mama said he was gay. So I never thought about Ray in that way, but that was because my mom had me around men. And what this guy is saying is, when you're running across men who don't treat women well, that has everything to do with men not seeing men treat women well, especially their mother, especially their father treating their mother well. And unfortunately, we're about 3 generations into single mothers raising sons. So how often is a son seeing his father treat his mother well, take care of his mother, provide for his mother? How often are we seeing that? So when you're running into these guys, that's what unfortunately, you're running into a guy who hasn't seen that. So it's important to go out of your way to make sure your son sees that that's how you treat women from an early age. You take care of the situation. You are the protector and you are the problem solver. Period. All right, let's get back to the video.
You can imagine how important that connection was between him and his mother. But one day when he was a little bit older, the 5 of us were all sitting down watching a movie called Real Steel, which is essentially Rocky, but with robots. And I remember looking at Tina and I said, do you know what the agoge is? She goes, no. I said, the agoge is where the Spartans sent their sons when they turned 7 in order to begin their training as warriors for the protection of the city-state. And she kind of looked at me weird, like, why are you telling me this? And I looked at Luke, who was used to wrestling and boxing with Daddy whenever we watched shows like this. I looked back at Tina and I said, let me show you what I mean. And so Luke and I start boxing, right? We're boxing, we're wrestling, we're going back and forth, and I get him. Not hard, just enough to where it kind of surprised him. And instead of backing away, he let out his little boy version of a war cry, and brother, he just charged me, right? He came right at me, fist just going nuts. He was going to show me. And I remember my wife at that moment looking a little bit horrified, and she said, what just happened to my little boy? And I looked up at Tina and I said, he's not your little boy anymore. He's mine now. Now, before anyone gets mad at me, he still desperately loves his mother. However, this is the point where things...
That's right. That's right. That's the point. It's a point in every boy's life
did begin to change,
where his father becomes the primary example in his life. Obviously, as you grow from an infant, toddler, as your little boy, the relationship with your mother is extremely important. Extremely important. However, one thing I found by having a little girl and a little boy, girls are trying to communicate with you as soon as they can. And once they start talking, they won't stop. I mean, literally, it's a beautiful thing. But girls are trying to communicate with you from day one. And and to a certain extent, we like to say that we raise girls and we coddle the boys, but it's not necessarily true. Actually, girls just, I don't want to use the term they mature faster. But they want to, for lack of a better word, they want to be independent quicker. And what stops that a lot of times is actually having a dad around who's taking care of things and who actually, for lack of a better way of putting it, creates a princess, so that kind of stops that drive to a certain extent. However, they still, will do the things that's right. That's why you got a lot of sisters in college and a lot of brothers that's not, because they're trying to create that independence and make it happen. With boys in particular, boys, they'll talk. If you don't make them talk and teach them how to talk, they'll play that little baby role until they grown ass men still living in your house. So that's what he's saying, that at some point in adolescence, in early adolescence, the boy has to start becoming a man. And at that point, his primary example of that is the father. And with fathers, that's terribly important. Terribly important. You know, I never had a quote unquote rites of passage program. You know, I just had men around me. Like my mom married my stepfather. I hold his name. He was that type of man. Your child, I'll adopt him. Because that's my child. I'm taking care of him. That's the type of man he was. He was a man's man. And so that was my example. So my mother never necessarily had to hand me over to him or any of that. You know, he just was that example. And I followed. You know, I wanted to be the man that he was. I wanted to be the man that my grandfather was. I wanted to be the man that his father was. You know, so I was fortunate in that way to have men around me when I grew up. But when it's all said and done, there comes a time in early adolescence where the father becomes the primary, or where men, if you don't have a father, where you have to get him around men so they can start becoming the primary example of what a man is. I had my son. He's not. He's very athletic. He loves to play sports with me, but he doesn't like to compete. And what I did was, I think he was for 7 and 8, or it might have been 8 and 9. I put him in the football program. Now, why I did that is because that was part of my way of coming up and understanding that you got to show up. And when I say show up, means that you can't let nobody run over you. So, for instance, my son's first practice in pads, you know, they went up and had to hit each other and tackle each other, and the guy ran over my son. He hit the ground and he got up looking at me. I was on the sideline, and I was like, "Why are you looking at me? Coach gonna tell you what you need to do." Coach put him back out there again, and he got knocked down again. And so that's when I said something to him. And basically, I just walked a little closer so he could hear me and say, "Look, you know what's going to happen. Don't let it happen again." Now it's the same thing finna happen. So if you don't prepare yourself and if you don't hit back, you're going to get ran over again. Show up, bro. And so for that year, he showed up. Next year, he showed up. You know, he wasn't the star of the team, but he showed up. And every practice they put him in the game, he showed up. And that was the lesson, to show up. Now the second year we played with a team, and it's funny because the first year I just couldn't find this team, so we kind of signed them up with the closest program, which happened to be down the street. And but this particular second year he played with a team called the Georgia Rattlers. I'm from Tallahassee, Florida, where you have Florida A&M University, which is the Rattlers, FAMU Rattlers. And they're orange and green. And so the Georgia Rattlers were patterned after the Florida A&M Rattlers. They're in Georgia. So when I saw that there was a team, I knew my son had to play for them. So I was able to catch up with them for the second year, and we started with that program. It was a great experience for my son. Great, you know, because the first year they didn't have a good team, and they only won one game. But the second year they was undefeated. So he was on a really great team with great athletes. And so it challenged him to be better. But most importantly, why I brought that up was this particular coach was actually a really good man. You know, now I don't know him personally as far as everything about him, but why I'm saying this is it was a crew of single mothers. It might have been about 15 to 20 of these sisters that when their son acted up, they brought him out to practice. They didn't have him in the football program, but he ran. But you might have, it's so funny. You have a team with pads and helmets on, and you might have 10 boys following behind them running, because he's like, if your son act up, bring him out here. I'll get him right. He beat him. He made him run and do some exercise, some push-ups, some stuff like that. And that I believe in. That those mothers was doing the best they could without having a man around them, so I appreciate that about them. Also, what I learned, and me and my son kind of learned this together, and I had to kind of show him this aspect. But when I would go out there, my son, like I said, he loves to play sports with me. We'll shoot the basketball, throw a football, baseball, whatever. So before practice, obviously we throwing the football. Whereas the kids show up, the other boys join in. Well, my son, he get tired of the competition. He go to the side, and I'm like, what you doing, man? He's like, well, I don't feel like jumping for the ball and all that. I was just playing catch with my dad, and so I explained to him that most of these boys don't have a dad. Think about at the game. If the dad does come, he's not coming with the mother. He coming with a girlfriend or coming, by himself. They're not together. So I said, a lot of these guys, these little kids, they don't have dads to play catch with. This is the only time they can play catch with a man. I said, so you got to share your dad when you come to practice. And you can't get like that. You got to join, keep doing what you're doing. Don't let, because you're sharing your dad with the other kids, don't let that stop you from having fun. Because a real man shows up for the community if necessary. Why wouldn't I play catch with them boys along with my son? Why would I be like, hey, y'all, my son don't really want to play with everybody, so I'm just throw with him? That would be the sorriest thing a man could do. That would be the sorry example for them boys. So yeah, it's a certain time where your son needs to be around men, period.
Change because they needed to. He was now entering an age and a world where his actions were going to expand beyond that of his mother, his father, and his two sisters. Work had to take place so that he could begin to understand what was expected of him. Because adolescence is confusing. Your son is caught in this stage between being a boy and being a man. And if they're not presented with challenges they have to overcome, regardless of discomfort, fear, or even pain, they're going to remain a boy.
That's right.
Now, if they're given the wrong kind of challenges, the kind which demean, confuse, or break them, they'll become the worst kind of man. So your job as a father during this time is to not only prepare them, but to actually orchestrate challenges that will, by design, challenge them physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. You have to judge carefully when to intervene and when to let them feel the pain and frustration of failure. The most important thing for them to learn at this stage is that they have to get back up, and they have to be able to distinguish not only from their objectives, but right and wrong, the just and the unjust. You are teaching them that they need to have a willingness to sacrifice for that which is noble. And I can remember very clearly the first time my son found himself in a position where he had to stand up for something. Probably the most difficult part about it for him was that he wasn't standing up to a bully or somebody he didn't like. He was standing up to his friends because they were all doing something that they shouldn't have been. And they knew it, and he knew it, but he was the only one that called him out for it. And he was ridiculed, and he was ostracized for it, but he stood his ground. I didn't find out about it until later. But I took him aside, and I was very intentional. It was just him and me. And I looked him in the eye and I said, I need you to know I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for that.
He communicated the good behavior. He communicated the good thing. He didn't just let it pass. He made sure he let him know, this is how you act. This is good. Because he was going to let him know if he did something bad. Look at this dude. You know he going to let him know if he did something bad. But he let him know it when he did something good. So you know that's the route to go. And that's what a man does. That's how you teach your son. That's why I highlighted it in the last video that the guy, like I said, our cultures are a little different. It may seem like, he let him go through temper tantrum. My kid ain't gonna be laying on the ground, Forget all of that. The major point was he was teaching his children and he was communicating with them. Not just the bad behavior, but letting them know this is how good works and you're doing good. I appreciate that about you. That's important. That's very important.
Not simply because you stood your ground, but because you were willing to do it with your own friends. And in many cases, that's harder. But learning to stand for what is right, especially when it costs you something, is the hallmark of a good man. And you have passed your first test.
That's right.
But keep this in mind, fathers. He is watching what you do every bit as closely as what you say. And the lesson taught by example will reside with him far longer than the one taught merely with words. And that is not a lesson you want to learn the hard way. But before you know it, he will be a young man. He's no longer a cub, he's no longer a boy. And too many fathers believe that our primary role during our son's youth was merely to provide, to establish order, to protect. And while all of those things are true, they are incomplete. Your son will have been looking for guidance since he was very small. He will glean what he can through observation, but he requires instruction. And if he doesn't get it from you, believe me, he will get it from somewhere. And what this part of his life should represent are the final stages of preparation. Because up to this point, if you have done your job, your son should know that you love him. But past this point, it's your respect that he desires. And he will know that while the love can be given, the respect he will have to earn. The burden at this point is shared between the father and the son, because your duty is to show him the pathway to
respect. Respect. You're going to love your son all the time. My son's at a point where he's 14 and he wants to be respected to a certain extent. And not so much like he want to fight and that type of deal. He just wants to be respected for who he wants to be. And I get that. And I definitely try to show him that I do respect him for who he wants to be. But what happens is children, especially young boys or young men, they don't know. They don't know if it's real. And what do I mean they don't know if it's real? So my son, for instance, isn't an athlete. I watch football religiously. He doesn't watch football. So I can see from time to time there's doubt in his mind whether or not I'm respecting what he's doing. And so I have to reinforce that as long as he's doing respectful things. I have to reinforce, letting him know that that's cool, bro. Okay, that's what you want to do. Well, how can we monetize it? How can you are you going to do that as an adult? So I try to conversate with him about the things he's interested in and show a certain interest to show him that I respect him for that, because I don't need him to be an athlete. I don't. I need him to be a productive African man who's helping free Africa from the chains of colonialism. That's my goal. Now, if he happens to, decide to be a professional athlete and make millions of dollars and put that towards Africa, then that's great. That's great. But that's not my expectations. My expectations is for whatever he does and he wants to do, for him to be able to use that towards innovating the motherland. Period. So, for him, he'll understand that as he gets a little older. You understand what I'm saying? But right now, he does things to, try to make sure he's being respected, and I respect him for that as well. because that shows me that he's moving in the right direction that I want him to go. But for young men in particular, that respect is important. But you have to teach them to be a respectful young man, which is what he's saying. And if you don't put certain tests in front of them, or if they don't pass certain life tests, then they're not going to be that man that gets respect. And they're not going to be that man that respects other men. He was saying you can mess around and build the worst kind of man. So we'll keep it going, but I just wanted to highlight that respect is very important.
Respect. But it's his alone to earn. And there is no substitution for that process, because he is going to encounter a world the way it is, not the way you wish it would be for him. And if you have done your job correctly, then in that moment of testing, when it matters most, he won't let himself down, because he won't want to let you down.
That's right.
And that's perhaps the hardest part for a father. It's the knowledge that you're merely preparing him for the test. One that is, it's in the distance. It's beyond your sight. It's beyond your control. And it is most likely beyond your intervention.
That's right.
And that's the way it has to be.
Yes, sir.
As his father, you know that one day the dragon is going to come, and it will be his responsibility to slay it.
That's right.
Because manhood is ultimately a threshold that he has to cross alone.
That's what mothers don't.
Now, one of my earliest memories
That's what mothers don't understand.
was sitting in the den with my grandfather, and him sharing a story of threatening to run away from home at 16 if my great-grandfather didn't sign the paperwork to allow him to join the Navy after Pearl Harbor. Later along in life, I witnessed my father's retirement from the LAPD as a homicide detective. And it was the first time anyone could remember a family of victims coming forward to present him with a ring commemorating the lives of the mother and two children who had lost their lives at the hands of a murderer that my father had helped to capture and bring to justice. And I remember those stories respectively as a boy and as a young man. But I also remember something else. It was the change that took place when I returned from my first tour in combat. And I took my place alongside them with my own stories of dragons slain and scars honorably earned. And I think what that reinforced to me in that moment was that the raising of boys to become young men is not only a responsibility, but it's a legacy.
There you
For
go.
those of us who were blessed with fathers and grandfathers who showed us the way, it's a legacy that you preserve.
That's right.
But for those who did not have that, it's a legacy that you begin.
That's right.
And there is something truly noble about the man who overcomes the absence of their own father.
You know, for young sisters, you know, and I don't know if, you know, I'm not sure who's all watching, but if you know any young sisters, you know, it's incumbent upon them to understand if there is no man around, then you are the person that has to help your son start the legacy of being a man. Part of why I want to take care of my family is there's a certain pride in doing that. Me personally, there's a certain pride in doing that. But more importantly, I'm fulfilling the promise of my ancestors, of the men that came before me to take care of our family. I personally am not, how can I put this? The men in my family took care of their women. So I that's my legacy. The least I can do is take care of my family. That's the least I can do. So, you know, that's part of what we don't understand as a community, that these boys are legacy. Either they're creating it or they're part of one. And we have to treat it that way. And we have to push them to be the best that they can be in that way. You know, I know, you know, one thing about raising kids, and, you know, if you have an active kid, then you really understand this, that, you know, you're working, but as soon as you get off work, you're working. Whether if they go to practice, then you got to take them to practice. Your day literally may not end till 10, 11 o'clock at night, depending on where you got to travel to take them to do what they're doing and that type of deal. Or if they have a game that you got to go to, all of that type of stuff, you know. But when it's all said and done, you know, you're doing the extra work to create a great human being and to create someone who will continue your legacy. And if you don't have both parents in the house, you know, then it's very important that you understand that, so that how you're moving is helping create that. If you ain't got no men in your life, you make sure your son got men in their lives. It's that same sacrifice. So, you know, yeah, you get off work, you want to go home, but you out till 11 o'clock taking your kids. It's that same type of sacrifice is what I'm saying. So yeah, legacy is very important. And, you know, I just wanted to highlight that, because a lot of times we don't understand. That's part of the importance, that we don't understand, that you have to know that he's going to be, he should be a father at some point. He should be a man to a woman at some point. So you have to instill that aspect in him. You have to put him around people who are doing that so that they can see it in action.
To ensure that their son does not experience the same loss. Ultimately, it's a difficult task. And in many ways, it's becoming even more so. But when I get tired and when I get frustrated, I imagine a future moment, maybe in my den one day, where my time will come, where I'm not the son, I'm not the father, but I'm the grandfather. And I will have the opportunity to sit alongside my son and my grandson. And I wonder what their stories of triumph and challenge might look like. And when I think about that, I then get up and get back to work in order to make sure that I've done my part to prepare them for that moment.
That's right.
A moment I very much want to experience one day.
That's right. That's right. That's what we all want as men.
When
Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, we back. Yeah, we got the cash up going. If you enjoying what you're seeing, or if you're learning something or whatever, you know, you can always contribute to keep us going. $, the original Rastafunk. If you got some opinions that you'd like to impart, if you just want to talk about what we're talking about, to spank or not to spank. I did put the StreamYard in all the comment sections, so you can call in by just hitting that link, and, you know, let us know what you're talking about. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. You know, before we end, I want to go over 8 things that I learned, and these are things they do in Japan when they're raising kids, that I think are relevant in raising children. And one of the reasons why I use Japan is because Japan was devastated after they bombed them in the mid 1940s. After World War II, Japan was devastated. However, they were a determined people, and literally within 20 years, they were competing with America economically, and building and starting to build industry, where they were building some of the best products in the world. and that's because they were determined. They've always been a determined people, and they've always had a very disciplined culture. However, it takes certain things that it takes certain rules that are consistent in raising your children so that they continue on. So these are 8 rules that Japanese people use in raising children. The first one is they teach their children history from a very early age. They're telling them all their folk stories, and all their stories are really dealing with Japanese history and the story of Japan and their culture. So from day one, they're imparting to their children their culture and history, and letting them know this is who you are and who you are going to be from day one. From day one. The second thing is the mother-child bond. One thing you'll find across the equator in the village, you'll find that the mother does everything with the child. She's working, the child's on her back. The mother does everything with the child. And what that creates is not just a bond of, it creates an affectionate bond where you understand, you're touching your child as often as possible. In Japan in particular, having a babysitter and all that type of stuff for children of very young age, they don't do that. It may have changed a little bit now, but they do not do that. Mother got her child because that's an important time in the child's life. And so that's how they traditionally do it as a culture in Japan. The third one, they create rules. They let you know from the get-go, this is how it goes. Now, one thing about Japan is you're dealing with disciplined adults. So they're following the rules too. So the kids are acting like the adults, but they know the rules. They know the boundaries. As the kids get older, they're in school. They got rules. They know to follow the rules. As the kids are able to join different things, they'll put them in extracurricular activities, mostly because they're seeing other people follow rules. So they're creating a person who's going to not push away from the society that they're building and from the direction they're going. They're building people to join in their society by creating rules and letting them know that this is how it goes from day one. The fourth thing, the community is involved. First, you got the family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, but then the whole community is involved. The whole community is it. And from a Japanese standpoint, what that means is when your child is out in the world, they understand people are looking at them to act the way they're supposed to act in the world. And that doesn't mean that you can't be the person you want to be. You can color your hair, you can do whatever you want to do, all those type of things that you want to be as an individual. However, you're not going to be in society fighting and arguing, spitting on the ground. It's just certain things. You're not going to throw trash. It's certain things you're not going to do because you got other people around who expect better of you. And you've learned that growing up. So the community is involved. Nutrition. In Japan, if you fix your child a lunch, they don't have no fruit cup, some Doritos and a soda or some Kool-Aid or a little juice pouch and all. They don't have that. They have real food their mother makes for them. And if they're eating at the cafeteria in the school makes real food, real vegetables that are cut by hand, real fruit that's picked and grown, not from a can. Why? Because you're learning. and you need your brain. You don't need something that's going to put you to sleep or something that's going to make you act real hyper. You need real food that's going to be healthy, that's going to help you grow, and it's going to help you pay attention and retain information. So nutrition is very important. And so they don't grow up eating bullshit, for lack of a better way of putting it. Number 6, they think of others. They grow up to think of others. Not so much, and not just thinking of others looking at them. They're growing up knowing that they're not the only one in society. That's what that means. You're not the only one. It's other people around, and hey, we're gonna be respectful. So it's not, you're not gonna see children in Japan acting out. Not because their parents are gonna discipline them, but more so because they're taught that people are watching. Why are you gonna do that? Why are you doing that? They're taught to be respectful of other people, to be respectful of that space, because you're in a society with people. And cooperation is what got the country where they're at. So you want to cooperate, you want to be able to cooperate with the people in behavior as well, not just working together, behavior. They're aware that there's other people around. And the last thing was, the 7th thing is they're very independent. They're taught to be independent from an early age. Like a 6 or 7-year-old may walk to school on their own. Yeah. But I've lived in Japan. It's unheard of to molest kids or kidnap kids and that type of deal. They don't do that. I was 8 years old. My parents gave me money to go off of the base, go shopping, and come back. My only mandate was don't get on a bullet train and go to Tokyo. And I could have got on a bullet train, because no one's going to touch me or do anything. And other kids do this all the time because they teach you to be independent very early. And the last thing, which goes back to spank or not to spank. They discipline in private. First of all, the child not going to act out in public. But if he does, there are disciplined people. A parent is expected to be patient and show patience. So the parent is going to be patient. When you get back home, or when you get somewhere where you can have their focus, because that's what it's about. When you're chastising a child and they get embarrassed in front of people, they're looking around, they're not focused on the lesson. So they discipline them in privacy. So it's me and you get the lesson. And I think that's important as well. We do too much showing out in public, thinking that's what we're supposed to do, mostly because we feel the child embarrassed us. I've been a victim of that. I literally have pulled my son out of a line in the airport. When I thought about it, I felt like I might could have waited. But I'm the type of person, I don't like to I like to deal with it right then, and so that we could talk about it right then. You know. But it wasn't no yelling and all of that. It was, I pulled him aside so I could talk to him. But we're still in a crowded airport. So, it's hard. You still, feel a certain way with people around, and it's not like people don't know what's going on when they see you pull your son and you're talking to him, and I'm sure I wasn't looking happy. So, when it's all said and done, I do believe in being proactive. I do what I call, I learned this term when I was in middle school, assertive discipline. But I don't hit, but I've been known to grab you and talk to you with me holding you, and not holding you where I'm leaving an imprint on your arm or any of that, but I'm holding you because I want you to understand. I want you to be focused on what I'm saying right now. I need you to be focused. So when it's all said and done, the Japanese way is not an uncommon way. All those 8 things are what pretty much is done in the village around the equator. That's pretty much how humans have actually raised children in real societies around the world for a long time. Those same rules. Those are actually great rules. So using them was not necessarily just using them because they came up in a certain way, and it takes raising your children in a certain way to come up. It does. However, this practice has been, those 8 rules and that practice has been something that has been going on for a while in a lot of successful societies. And they may not be successful where they're trying to compete or where they compete economically with certain world powers, but they're the most humane societies on earth, where the men are taking care of their children and their families in their little village, where the women are taking care of their children and their families in their and doing their part in the village, where there's actually gender roles, because when it's all said and done, that works best in a society that has men and women. Men doing their thing in protecting and problem solving. It was funny. I was saying to a friend that when men didn't stand up, a lot of times women had to stand up. And the first thing he said is, as quick as I said it, and the women was mad about it. He said the women was pissed off with the men for not standing up because they had to do it. And it's very ironic because we're in this same, we're kind of dealing with this in this society over here with the Black American woman. She's very upset with the Black American man. She's very upset. And I can guarantee you that whether or not, well, let me put it like this. We've been raising the wrong and building the wrong Black America. And a lot of us think that corporal punishment and hitting our children is the problem. No, the problem is we're not dealing with how many parents and children do we know, or we can tell, are not dealing with these little eight little rules of raising kids. We know our kids aren't getting the best nutrition. We know that. We know they're not learning to respect other people in society. We know that a lot of times community isn't helping raise the child. We're only creating independence so the child can get out of our house. So when it's all said and done, for me, I'm not into spanking. I'm not into beating a child. I don't think it's necessary. But I am into teaching a child. I am into being very as proactive as possible in rearing that child to be the person I'm going to like. I already love them. But how do you build the child that you like? How do you build the person? I tell my kids all the time, yeah, we friends, but we're not the friends we're going to be with the adults you become. we could do some real friendly talking then. But right now, I'm trying to get you to that point. I'm your parent. And my job is to get you to the point where you can help build Africa. You can help innovate Africa. That's my job. And when you understand that's your duty, period. As an adult, you have one mandate to help rebuild Africa in the way that your talent can. So with it all said, to spank or not to spank, I say not to spank. I say teach. You're welcome to do what works for you, but I think results show that being proactive in your child's life, teaching your child, having certain patience at certain times with your child, and when you're teaching your child after they've done something wrong, making sure they're focused on the lesson. I'll say this. When my mother beat me, I was only focused on not getting caught. I never thought I ain't doing that again. Not one time. Not one time did I think I'm not doing that again. Every time I thought, boy, I can't be getting caught. Boy, I messed that up. However, when I was taught lessons, all of those stuck. I remember them to this day. I wasn't allowed to play with, I think I mentioned this another one. I had to play with Chewbacca when Star Wars come out because I couldn't play with white action figures. My grandmother would not allow those. And so my mother continued that. Because that's my father's mother who was like that. Well, so my mother continued that. She never bought me any doll, any action figures that was white. That was a lesson that was instilled in me to respect and love our blackness. That other stuff is being pushed on us. Go out of your way. I don't know how many of you have ever seen a black. You may not. I'm old, and so a lot of y'all may not even remember this. But there was this little I guess it was a doll, Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy. It was a little white doll that was had little overalls and freckles or whatever, and it was a cloth doll, cloth yarn hair, da-da-dee. It was really popular in the mid 70s or whenever. And I don't know how many of you have ever seen a black one, but my grandmother made sure we had a black one. It was not going to be no white Raggedy Ann or Raggedy Andy in our house. It's going to be a black one because you're going to respect who you are. You're going to play with toys that represent you. Or you're not going to play with those toys. Period. That wasn't beat into me. I learned that's how it was because that's what they did automatically. Didn't change. It was simply told to me that we buy toys that represent you. You play with toys that represent you. Which reinforced my mother saying, you're going to marry a woman that look like you. See how that works? It reinforced all of that. None of that was beat into me. The greatest lessons in my life, I learned because I was taught. Not because I said so, was told to me, and I followed that. 9 times out of 10, because I said so, that was something I was going to do. and try not to get caught. Yeah, I'm trying not to get caught doing that. But the things that stuck, that I respected and that mattered, they were all taught to me. Things that makes me a productive adult, they were taught to me. They were taught to me. I was told why, how, all of that. It's almost like throwing a child in the pool and being mad because they can't swim. What kind of shit is that? You teach a child to swim. You don't just throw them in the pool. You teach them to swim. And if they're not learning the way you need them to learn, you teach them better. You don't beat them. How productive is that? The last thing I'm going to leave you all with before we end tonight is this. If you're an adult and you have a difficult situation with your child, and violence is what you used to get to resolve that situation, what do you think your child gonna do when they get in a hard situation with another child, with another adult? All they've seen to resolve the situation was who was the most powerful in violence. So they feel like that's what they got to be, the most powerful in violence. That's what hitting your child teaches. You should never let a child keep you from being smarter than them. You should always be able to outthink a child. Every now and then you're going to run into this child that's so smart that you can't outthink them because they're just a genius. You know, you may run across that, but as an adult, that's not going to happen often. I used to work at a school, Virginia Schumann Young in Fort Lauderdale. It was an experiment. They were trying to experiment and create a Montessori style school in a typical public environment. And Montessori is where they use tools to teach blocks for math. It's just a totally different style where it's hands-on and where the kids teach the other kids. So like some of the classrooms will be built where you got fifth grade with fourth grade. So what the fifth grade learns, they'll be teaching the fourth grade in certain times of the day. So it's that type of environment. And what I learned from being there was that kids respond to you talking to them and telling them what's right. I'm sorry, let me say this. Kids first respond to the people, to the adults they know care about them. If they ain't sure about you, caring about them and their welfare, that's why a lot of these teachers trying to make money are having problems. I've experienced it, I know. The kids can see right through that shit. When you don't want to be around them and you can't wait to get from around them or you're a substitute, they can see through all of that. I had 4 teachers that I worked with. I ran the computer lab and then I helped out 4 teachers. And out of the 4, 2 were awesome and 2 were sorry at what they were doing at that point. And the kids responded to the awesome teachers. They had great results. The other ones had difficulties. One of them was the first day the black kids was like, he prejudiced. And I was like, you got to give him a chance. He probably not prejudiced. You know, y'all just da-da-dee-da-da-day. And by a week or so, I was like, bro, you're treating the black kids different. And they notice. And I notice. And I can't be around you if you're going to keep doing that. You know, so he kind of checked himself, but he still, you know, it was still times where I would have to take black kids out of the classroom and talk to them so that they could refocus because it wasn't right, you know. So when it's all said and done, no, don't hit your kids. It's not necessary. And if you choose to do that, just understand that there are certain detriments that go with that. And, you know, every now and then, maybe you do feel like you need to spank them on the butt or whatever, but I promise you that teaching them and not making them, not losing your composure and not letting the child outthink you is what's the most important thing. However you resolve it, just know that your child is going to use those same tactics to resolve issues that are difficult for them. So, you know, just understand that aspect, and you know, do the best you can. That's all we're all trying to do. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to say that I know the perfect way. I'm here to say internalize, think about it, and make the best decision moving forward, so that as a community we can raise up some awesome men and some awesome sisters for these men, some awesome men for these sisters. You know, that's the bottom line. You don't want to be raising this great kid and they have no one to marry. So it's a community thing. If you see your brothers and sisters out there doing something that you can help them with, help them. If it's just a word of advice, you know, people may not take it right then, but do what you can. We're all trying to grow together. We're all trying to build together. We're all trying to make, we're trying to get rid of this sorry ass Black American that we built and create an African that the world will respect because we've done the things to demand it. You know, one of the things I like I said last night, it's a reason why the Jewish people, whether you like Zionists or not, it's a reason why nobody wanted them in their land in the early 1900s, and now people won't touch them as they are, you know, doing genocide on TV every day. No one will touch them. Oh, that's wrong, but nobody doing nothing about it. Nobody with real power. I don't want to be able to put genocide on the people, but I want that type of respect for Africa. I want that type of respect for Africa. So with that said, we'll see you tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. We're here every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. doing our Rastafunk's Internalize. I'm Rastafunk the Mighty Lion. I appreciate everybody who tuned in. Don't forget, we got the $, the original Rastafunk. If you want to choose to send us some Cash App and, you know, help us with the channel and the things that we're doing. And we appreciate everyone for tuning in and continue to, you know, support what we're doing with your views. And we love you. Right on with the real. Peace.